Coming up on a newscast, South Korea's military apologized for failing to shoot down the North Korean drones that entered the country. The JC has pledged to actively deploy assets to detect such UAVs and other provocations. The Yoon administration granted special pardons to former President Lee Myung-bak, among other political figures. The list also includes former secretaries of the Park Geun-hye administration. China is set to scrap quarantine for inbound travelers. South Korea is keeping tabs on the situation while battling its own winter virus wave. Hello and welcome. I'm Daniel Che, here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. The South Korean military has publicly apologized for failing to shoot down North Korean drones that crossed the border, while expressing regret that JC has devised plans to better counter such provocations. Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff has offered a public apology for failing to shoot down the North Korean drones that crossed over into the South airspace on Monday. On Tuesday afternoon, Lieutenant General Kang Shin-chul said the military acknowledges and regrets its limited capability to detect and shoot down small unmanned aerial vehicles that are 3 meters wide or smaller. The military has vowed to thoroughly check each unit's detection and strike assets and aggressively mobilize them for a stronger defense posture. Kang added that the military will come up with ways to shoot the vehicles without causing damage to civilians by carrying out air defense training and actively employ detection devices along with strike assets.
To boost warfare capabilities, we will establish a drone unit to conduct surveillance and reconnaissance operations that will monitor the enemy's major military facilities. We'll also secure physical and non-physical attack assets along with stealth drones and operate them in an integrated way.
Such remarks come in line with what President Yoon had said during a cabinet meeting on Tuesday morning. Yoon vowed to ramp up South Korea's surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities using military drones by speeding up the establishment of a drone unit and deploying advanced stealth drones. Meanwhile, regarding the issue, the United States has reaffirmed its commitment to the defense of South Korea. According to the Voice of America, a White House National Security Council spokesperson said on Monday local time that the U.S. is aware of reports that 5 North Korean drones crossed the inter-Korean border, also known as the military demarcation line. The spokesperson added that Washington is in close consultation with South Korea on the nature of the incursion, recognizing the need for South Korea to protect its territorial integrity. It said the State Department, too, has issued a similar response to the North Korean drone incursion. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The nation's military spotted and tracked what initially appeared to be North Korean drones, but after further observation, it turned out to be a flock of birds. According to the JC, as military jets were mobilized in the process, emergency texts were sent to Gangwon residents. Emergency shelters had also been opened. North Korean aerial drones are commonly less than 3 meters long, making them easy to mistake for large birds. North Korea kicked off a series of Workers' Party Central Committee meetings. The regime's leader called on officials to devise a stronger and more confident military strategy. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says that the North should devise more confident and stronger fighting strategies. This is according to the North's state-run media Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday. His remarks came during the Workers' Party Central Committee meeting held earlier this week to discuss next year's policy direction. The KCNA also reported that at this enlarged plenary meeting, Kim said the North has made progress despite enduring historic hardships. He said the power of the regime has remarkably increased in all areas, including politics, military, the economy, and culture, and he laid out next year's goals for major industrial sectors, including the metal and chemical industries. At the meeting, 5 key items on the agenda were unanimously approved, including the major state policies for this year and next year's budget, which reflected this year's. This meeting wraps up an eventful year for the Hermit Kingdom. COVID-19 hit the North hard and also put a strain on its economy. And the regime launched an unprecedented amount of missiles throughout the year, leading to more independent sanctions from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The KCNA report also said that Kim will continue to get reports from his subordinates, which suggests more details on the North's military and economy will be announced soon. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The Yoon administration is granting special pardons ahead of the new year, including our former President Lee Myung-bak and even officials implicated in the President Park-geun administration scandals. Yoon Jung-min reports.
As widely expected, the names of high-profile politicians were on the list of Yoon Suk-yeol's presidential pardons.
각계의 의견을 수렴해서 신중하게 사면 대상과 범위를 결정했습니다. 이번 사면을 통해 국력을 하나로 모아나가는 계기가 되기 바랍니다.
Among over 1,300 pardoned, two men grabbed attention the most: former conservative President Lee Myung-bak and former liberal Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor Kim Kyung-soo. Lee was pardoned with reinstatement, meaning his remaining 15-year jail term and unpaid fines are exempted. He was put behind bars for 17 years in 2020 for embezzlement and bribery, but his sentence had been suspended due to health reasons. Former Governor Kim Kyung-soo, meanwhile, was set free on parole without reinstatement, meaning he cannot run for election until May 2028. Kim was a key aide of former Liberal President Moon Jae-in and was put behind bars for 2 years in 2021 on charges of rigging online opinion posts for political purposes. But the main opposition Democratic Party calls it an unwanted package deal, claiming Lee and Kim's pardons can't be compared as one man has 15 years of jail time remaining, while the other only had about 5 months left to serve. The ruling People Power Party has fired back, insisting Kim should be ashamed of what he has done. Others on the list was former President Park Geun-hye's chief of staff, Kim Gi-chun, who was found guilty of pressuring a business lobbyist group to provide funds to conservative activists. Also included were former Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, barred for bribery charges, and 3 former intel agency chiefs, Nam Jae-jun, Lee Byung-gi, and Lee Byung-ho, who were imprisoned for offering off-the-book funds to former President Park. Yoon's special New Year pardons, his second clemency since taking office, takes effect on Wednesday. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Government ministries are making progress reports to the president. The Trade Ministry's goal is export growth despite forecasts of a decline. The Ministry of SMEs and Startups plans to focus on digitalization. Shin Ah-young fills us in.
South Korea's Trade and Business Ministries presented their plans for next year to President Yoon on Tuesday, plans aimed at achieving growth despite economic uncertainties. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it aims to achieve growth in exports next year despite the government's outlook of a decline of 4.5%. To meet the goal, the ministry will seek to bolster exports in promising sectors like nuclear power plants and the defense industry. It's also aiming for the country's exports to reach $680 billion. To achieve this, it's going to come up with policies through the exports strategy meeting chaired by President Yoon. With the Ukraine war having exposed vulnerabilities in global supplies of energy, the ministry is also planning to accelerate the revitalization of South Korea's nuclear power ecosystem. The goal is to extend the lives of 7 nuclear plants by next year by providing the industry with support worth 3.5 trillion won, or around $2.7 billion, in the form of equipment and financial aid. To create drivers of future economic growth, it will focus on nurturing the bio-industry and in its role as energy ministry, as well as 5 key industries in the energy sector, including hydrogen and offshore wind. Earlier this morning, President Yoon raised concern about the budget for next year that lawmakers passed last week. He said it lacks measures to support important growth industries like semiconductors. President Yoon also received a briefing on next year's plans from the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, which will be focusing on digitalization. It aims to nurture so-called global unicorn companies, meaning new firms worth more than $1 billion. As part of these efforts, it will select 1,000 digital startups over the next 5 years in the industry of chips, robots, and AI to support those sectors in terms of R&D and help them enter the global market. And with the pandemic having driven more business online, it's also planning to help Korea's traditional markets achieve their own digital transformation. Meanwhile, President Yoon called on the ministries to actively cooperate in 2023.
오늘 우리 산업부와 중기부가 함께 내년도 업무 보고를 하는 이 자리가 기업 간의 상생이 또 부처 간의 이런 유대와 협력, 소통이 바탕이 돼서 이루어질 수밖에 없는 것이기 때문에 산업부와 중기부가 내년에는 더 그 업무 협조를 공고히 하기 당부를 드립니다.
신하영, 아리랑 뉴스.
South Korea's consumer expectations for the next 12 months suggest inflation may have passed its peak. Expectations fell in December for a second month in a row. The BOK survey of roughly 2,500 households shows expected inflation for the period has come down from November by 0.4 percentage points to 3.8, the first time falling below 4% since June. The fall was led by stable agricultural and petroleum goods prices and the current exchange rate with the U.S. To bring down consumer prices, the government will slash import tariffs for 101 items. From next year, it will switch to tariff rate quotas under which a certain volume can be imported at a lower tariff rate for a certain period. The cuts are worth more than 1 trillion won, or around $800 million. Tariffs have already been reduced to zero for certain items like pork, chicken, and eggs. The zero rate will be extended to 11 other food items, including cooking oil and coffee beans. And to help bring down heating bills this winter, LPG and LNG will also be duty-free until March. From next June, South Korea will change to the international standard of counting one's age when it comes to legal and administrative purposes. The Korean method is having newborn babies start at age 1 and adding a year every January 1st. The adoption of the international standard is expected to prevent confusion in terms of the law, regulations, contracts, and public documents. The government will work to let people know about the change so that it can also be adopted in everyday life, where the use of traditional so-called Korean age has been more common. China is set to scrap quarantine for inbound travelers from January 8th. While the country only reported 1 COVID-related death on Monday, it's believed millions of new infections are straining the local medical system. Yoon-jin reports.
On December 7th, China's health authorities started removing its zero-COVID lockdown policy in an effort to return to normal life. While the country is seeing large numbers of new cases every day, adjustments are being made in handling the pandemic now as an endemic. Diners are returning to restaurants and consumers returning to shopping malls.
Starting from the second half of this month, we've seen a fourfold or fivefold increase in the number of diners per day. And during the holidays, the number of restaurant goers is at 80% to 90% of the figure before the epidemic outbreak.
This comes just in time for the end-of-the-year holidays.
Previously, we had 3,000 to 4,000 customers each weekend, but last weekend, more than 10,000 customers visited our store. I believe we're going to have booming sales during the upcoming New Year holiday, a peak season.
The Chinese National Health Commission announced on Monday that starting January 8th, China's borders will be back open for international travel, both inbound and outbound. Beijing is scrapping its 8-day quarantine for arrivals and its testing on arrival. Inbound passengers will only be required to present a negative test result obtained within 48 hours prior to boarding. And as long as passengers show no signs of illness, they will not be subject to any special restrictions or quarantine while in the country. China's water and land ports will also gradually reopen as Chinese citizens will also be allowed to go abroad. Domestic control measures for the virus will also be downgraded to the less strict Category B from the current top-level Category A. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea is seeing a slower increase in its virus numbers. Still, authorities are keeping a close eye on neighboring China following its announcement to scrap its strict COVID policies. Song Yoo-jin brings the updates.
COVID cases are increasing at a slower pace here in South Korea. The country on Tuesday reported more than 87,000 of them. That's up by just 60 from last week and 770 from the week before. But it's the largest figure for a Tuesday in 4 months. 592 critical cases were reported and 50 more deaths. The head of the country's COVID-19 response team said the virus situation will turn stable thanks to fewer outdoor activities during winter. To make this possible, health authorities are also keeping close tabs on the virus situation abroad, such as in neighboring China. China took a big step in ending its nearly 3-year-long stringent zero-COVID policy. From January 8th, travelers are not required to quarantine and test upon arrival on the mainland. Restrictions on the number of international flights and passenger capacities will also be removed. One expert says this could be bad news for South Korea.
Scrapping mandatory testing and quarantine could lead to more infections and the emergence of new variants. Relaxed travel rules also mean more Chinese citizens will travel abroad, which could trigger cross-border transmission of new variants. South Korea is especially at risk as we're very close to China.
The experts stress that the government should do all that it can to prevent a new COVID nightmare early next year. 송유진, Arirang News.
Another survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery has died. Only 10 others remain alive, according to the South Korean government's official registry. The death of Eok-sun was announced by the House of Sharing. She died Monday night at the age of 94 from acute pneumonia. During World War II, she was taken by the Japanese military to Manchuria as a sex slave at age of 16. She returned to Korea right after liberation from Japan in 1945. He took part in various efforts such as the Wednesday demonstrations aimed at getting Japan to officially apologize to and to compensate the victims and survivors. Moving on to other stories now. Elsewhere around the world, Ukraine's foreign minister said the country wants a peace summit in February at the UN. Meanwhile, in southwestern Russia, a drone attack on an airbase left 3 people dead. Yishu has the latest.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says that his government wants a peace summit at the end of February when the war in Ukraine is expected to enter its second year. Kuleba said in an interview with the Associated Press on Monday that Kyiv wants a summit at the United Nations with Secretary General Antonio Guterres as a mediator.
We think that the United Nations could be the best venue for holding this summit, because this is not about making a favor to a certain country. This is really about bringing everyone on board.
Kuleba added that Russia must face a war crimes tribunal before his country talks directly with Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry on Monday said a Ukrainian drone attack on an airbase in southwestern Russia has left 3 people dead. According to the ministry, falling debris from an aerial drone shot down by Russian air defenses killed 3 of its technical staff. Russia accused Ukraine of a similar attack on the airfield earlier this month. While the Ukrainian military did not officially admit to the latest attack, Yuri Inat, the spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, said that the explosions at the base are the consequences of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry on Monday shared a statement that called for Russia's exclusion from the Security Council of the United Nations and removal from being a member of the UN entirely. The Foreign Ministry alleged gross violations of the norms of international law and for crimes committed on the territory of Ukraine. The statement says Russia could be readmitted once it fulfills the conditions for membership. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The South Korean government aims to groom more tech talent by 2026. The goal is to nurture 1 million prodigies in the digital sector. Shin Yeon provides a glimpse of the future.
Using AI, flying drones, operating robots. These are the basic things taught at this elementary school.
Unlike other elementary schools, we learn how to program software and handle AI. I personally like programming. I entered myself into programming competitions. This shocked many because I was one of the youngest contestants.
Located in a small county in Gyeongsangnam-do Province, Ani Elementary School adapted an AI curriculum in 2016, aiming to raise its students' digital literacy. As of now, there's some 560 other elementary schools like this one, all aiming to teach AI and software programming as regular subjects by 2025.
Our students perform much better in computer or IT classes when they entered middle school compared to other elementary school graduates. That's because they're familiar with AI and programming. First and second graders play with robots during recess. Third graders learn how to make games using software. We make sure AI is part of their daily routine.
Though it may be best to learn how to use AI, robots, and software from a young age, it's never too late to become a digital prodigy. Here at the Innovation Academy, even adults can learn how to become more tech-savvy.
How? With no set textbooks, no professors, no expensive tuition fees, and no graduate degrees. It's called 42 Seoul. Back in 2019, the Ministry of Science and ICT created the school, using the world's first computer science academy of this kind, 42 in Paris, as a benchmark. Here, students learn from each other. They graduate only after 2 years of projects that get harder and harder.
I enrolled in this academy because I want to become a developer. Nowadays, companies aim to recruit developers with high skill sets and practical experience, rather than prestigious university degrees. I think 42 Seoul read this trend perfectly. Its innovative educational programs like this can create candidates who will land jobs in digital companies.
South Korea hopes to change up the country's education methods so that more students are comfortable with new tech, like AI and the metaverse. In the next 5 years, more schools will have software education, AR, and VR at the core of their curriculum. 신예은, Arirang News.
South Korea aims to cut annual average levels of ultrafine dust particles by 30% to 12 micrograms per cubic meter by the year 2032. Ozone concentration levels also increased from 27 parts per billion in 2015 to 32 parts per billion last year. The country aims to increase the percentage of ozone measurement stations that meet environmental standards from the current 41% to 50% in 2032. They will also devise measures to improve the seasonal fine dust management program, reduce emissions from ozone-causing substances, and supply more zero-emission vehicles.
A round of light snowfalls in the forecast for central regions and the west coast. The amount of snowfall won't be too much, with about 1 centimeter. For Ulleungdo Island and eastern islets of Dokdo, up to 3 centimeters are in the forecast. With freezing temperatures expected overnight, frost and ice may appear on the road, so please be extra careful when driving. And due to the inflow of fine dust from overseas, most regions will be under poor air quality tomorrow. Parts of central regions will see air quality standing in the bad category for the entire day. The surrounding regions, including Seoul and Jeollabuk-do province, will see finest concentrations soar temporarily for the morning. And northern central regions will see snow until the morning hours. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting off at -6 degrees. As for the daily highs, Seoul and Chuncheon will be reaching -2. Gwangju and Daegu will be topping out at 3 degrees Celsius. And for the latter half of the week, sunny conditions will appear frequently in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.